Hi guys, we are going to review circumference of a circle. You did a pretty awesome activity yesterday where you got to discover more about circumference and about pi and diameter. So you've got some experience under your belt. But let's go ahead and practice with the formula today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over a couple of notes with you just to review. And then at the bottom of the front page and then all in the back, we're going to actually practice so that you have it fresh in your mind and you'll be good to use it for your homework, to use it for the test, and then to obviously use it in your future if you need to use it in the future. So let's go ahead and get started. First, yesterday you were able to do an awesome activity to identify where pi comes from. And then so just to remind you about where pi comes from, we have the pi symbol, and it's the circumference divided by the diameter. So you were able to find the circumference of several objects yesterday, which is awesome. And then you could then discover what pi was after you discovered the diameter and the circumference. What we're going to do now is remind you of the three different ways that we write pi. So you'll first see the standard way of writing pi, which is 3.14159265, and it goes on and on and on. In fact, we can't ever really write pi because pi is a number that goes on and on and on, but something that's awesome about it is also that it's non-repeating. So people have tried to find an end to pi, but it's infinite, so it doesn't end. It goes on and on and on. But then there are two other standard ways that we approximate pi. It's approximated by using 3.14, which you're familiar with, or 22/7, which is what you may have learned for the first time yesterday. So today, you're going to use the pi symbol, you are going to use 3.14, and you're also going to get familiar with 22/7. So all three of those you need to know how to do, and it's in your 7th grade standards as well. So hopefully you'll become masters at it. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Let's actually talk about circumference now versus pi. Okay, circumference is the distance around the outside of a circle. Okay, you're going to need to know this for multiple different reasons. But then if you want to think about the real world, there are several jobs that I came up with off the top of my head that have to deal with circumference all the time. So construction workers or people that are managing buildings and companies that are building all of these new things. If you've noticed, the shapes of buildings aren't just your standard prism anymore. Sometimes they have odd shapes, semicircles, circles, triangles, all kinds of stuff. So if you want to be any kind of construction worker or architect, you need to know how to deal with circumference. Also, interior designers, if they're doing any kind of design inside, they have to deal with circumference or circles. Exterior designers, zoos, parks, museums, anything that they want to create. I say zoos specifically because they have to come up with circumference of a circle and certain habitats that they create inside the zoo. And then more commonly, you're starting to see what's called roundabouts in streets. So that's a type of intersection, and they have to have a certain circumference in order to prevent accidents from happening and the speed of cars. Okay, so let's go on and look about how we find it and then how we're going to use it to solve multiple problems or situations. So it's really easy to find if you know what the formula is. So there's actually two ways that you can write the formula. Okay, and this is based off of the information that you already know about circles from Monday. Okay, the formula for circumference is C for circumference is equal to 2 pi r. Okay, and what that means is you have a 2 times the symbol of pi, which we already talked about up above, and then r actually stands for your radius, which is just that short line from the center to the outside of a circle. If you think about this, and I rearrange this order, circumference is also equal to pi times 2 radii. 2 radii should sound familiar to you as well. If I have 2 radii, that means I have a radius, the center to the edge, and another center to the edge. That actually creates something that we already know called the diameter, okay? Which is also why the other formula is 2 pi times d, or what's also known as the diameter of a circle, okay? So I also want to point out that we can rewrite this formula and it would mean the same thing as c equals diameter times pi. That's like saying 1 times 3 is the same thing as 3 times 1. Either way you write it, it's the same formula because it involves the same terms. So we have pi times diameter or diameter times pi, all the same thing, along with 2 pi r, which is 2 radii in pi, or pi times r times 2. These are all the same no matter how you write them. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice. First, practice 1. Let's identify what diameter and radius is if I provide you the formula. Okay, so in the first one, they say circumference is equal to 2 pi. Well, based off of that formula that I just gave you, we know that circumference is equal to pi times the diameter. We can also rewrite that as circumference is equal to diameter times pi. They mean the same thing. 1 times 2 is the same thing as 2 times 1. So it doesn't matter how we write it. The second way I wrote it is actually going to help me figure out the information that they want. So if I write this right underneath here, circumference is equal to the diameter times pi. If you look, there's a lot of similar information here. The c's are the same and the pi's are the same, which means the only thing left is the diameter. So guess what the diameter is, guys? It's 2, because that's what's in the formula. So if the diameter is 2, then the radius is half of that, because remember from the picture above, it's 1. So remember on your circle, your diameter is the distance all the way across, and then your radius is just the distance from the center to the outside. All right, that was a horrible circle, sorry. Okay, let's do the same thing. We're going to move on to the next one. The formula is c is equal to 16 pi. Well, if I rewrite my formula, c is equal to the diameter times pi. They already had the circumference taken care of, and they already had pi taken care of. So the only thing left was the diameter, which means the diameter is 16 in this formula. If the diameter is 16, that means the radius is 8, because it's half of it. Okay, next one. Circumference is equal to the diameter times pi. They already had the circumference and they already had pi, so that means diameter is 9, which means the radius is 4.5. Yeah, you can have a fraction or a decimal. If you want to write it as 4.5, awesome, write it as 4.5. All right, next one. C is equal to the diameter times pi, which means since they already have circumference and they already have pi, that 40 has to represent the diameter, which means the radius is half of it, which is 20. Hopefully you can now pull the diameter and or the radius if they've given you the formula. Just take the number from the formula and that should be your diameter, and you should be able to figure out your radius from your diameter. Just cut it in half. Okay, let's go ahead and move down to practice 2. Practice 2 is identify the circumference if I give you the diameter or the radius in terms of pi, which means they just want you to use the symbol. You're not using 3.14, you're not using 22/7, you're not using the pi button, you're just keeping it in terms of pi. Okay, so let me show you what that means. They say that the diameter is 4. Well, your formula is c equals pi times the diameter. Okay, well, you know that your diameter is 4, so c has to equal pi times 4. Well, we can also rewrite that as c equals 4 pi. This is your answer. 4 times pi is the same thing as pi times 4. The reason why we put 4 first is because pi is a symbol. you always put the value or the number value first and then the pi symbol after. Just like when we were doing terms before. We didn't put 5x, or we didn't put x times 5, we put 5x. The number always goes first, which is why in this formula, we have to put 4 pi, not pi 4, even though it means the same thing. All right, same thing with this one. The diameter is 2.7. So the formula is c equals pi times the diameter, which means c is equal to pi times 2.7. So c is equal to 2.7 pi. Sorry, it's a little sloppy. Okay, now they've given us the radius. Well, in my formula, I can use the other formula that involves the radius, which is c equals 2 times pi r. Okay, that means I have c is equal to 2 times pi, and the radius is times 5. Well, what's 2 times 5, guys? Okay, then you're going to say that c is equal to 10 pi. You can multiply your 2 and your 5 together because those are number values. They wanted you to keep it in terms of pi, so don't touch pi. Leave it alone. All right, last one. C is equal to 2 times pi times r because they gave me the radius, which is why I'm using that formula. C is equal to 2 times pi times 12.5. 12.5 times 2 is 25, so your answer is C equals 25 pi. These are all if they told you to keep it in terms of pi. Okay? Next practice. We are going to move on to practice number 3. This time, instead of keeping it in terms of pi, they actually want you to use 3.14 for pi. So I'm literally going to do the same thing, but instead of keeping it in terms of pi, I'm using 3.14. If you don't already have a calculator, make sure you have a calculator out because you are allowed to use one. All right. Now, the only thing with those red calculators is I don't want you to use the pi button. It told you to use 3.14, so you have to use 3.14. All right. So same thing. Diameter is 4, and they want you to find the circumference. So C is equal to pi times diameter. C is equal to, instead of using pi now, they want you to use 3.14. So 3.14 times 4. If you put in your calculator 3.14 times 4, you're going to get 12.56. However, if you notice this was in parentheses over here, they tell you to round it to the nearest tenths. The 10th place is the first decimal number. So if you look, 5 is in my 10th place, so I have to look at my 6 to determine if it's going to bump up or stay the same. 6 tells the 5 to bump up, so C is equal to 12.6. Okay. Next one. C is equal to pi times the diameter. I'm using this formula because they're giving me the diameter. Okay, so C is equal to 3.14 times, and instead of that D there, I'm going to put 2.7 because that's what they tell me the diameter is. So put it in your calculator. 3.14 times 2.7. When you put that in your calculator, you get 8.478. But you need to round it to the nearest tenths. So when you do, your 7 tells your 4 to bump up, and your answer is 8.5. All right. Next one, they gave you the radius. So that's why I'm going to change my formula to the one that has the radius in it. C equals 2 pi r. So C is equal to 2 times 3.14 times 5. If you put that in your calculator, you're then going to get your answer of 31.4. It's already in the tens place, so you don't have to round anything. Okay, last one. C equals 2 pi r. C is equal to 2 times 3.14 times 12.5. Okay, when you multiply that and put that in your calculator, put it in there, you get 78.5. It's already rounded to your tens place, so you don't have to do anything else. Okay, so this is what's awesome. You save time because you're now allowed to use a calculator for this topic. Okay. Practice 4. Let's identify the circumference if I've given you the diameter and the radius and use 22/7 for pi. Doing the same thing, except for instead of using 3.14, you're going to use 22/7. So here we go. We have C is equal to diameter times pi, or pi times diameter, either way you look at it. C is equal to, and since I'm using 22/7, that 49, I'm going to write it as 49/1 times 22/7. You can write it or you can type it in your calculator as a fraction if you want to, and it'll get you your answer. Or if you're the math view like me, I see that 47 and 7 can cancel. So I'll cancel these out, and this becomes 7, and this is a 1. So 22 times 7 actually gives me 154. So that is my answer. All right. It was a little sloppy. Let's do this next one. C is equal to pi times diameter. C is equal to, they told me to use 22/7 times the diameter they tell me up there is 1/44. You can actually just put that in your calculator. 22 ABC button 7 times 1 ABC button 44, and you can get your answer. Or if you see the math already and you want to cancel this out, that's fine. And I don't even have to use a calculator because I know that 1 times 1 is 1 and 7 times 2 is 14. So my circumference is 1/14. Okay. Using the formula with radius in it because they've given me the radius. So C equals 2 times pi times r. C is equal to 2/1, because I'm dealing with a fraction, 22/7 times 7/1, because I'm dealing with a fraction. Type that into your calculator. The 7's cancel, and I already know what 2 times 22 is, so C is equal to 44. All right, then the last one, C is equal to 2 times pi times r. C is equal to 2/1 times 22/7 times 14/88. Okay, when you put that in your calculators, or if you want to simplify it, you'll find out that C is equal to 1, because everything canceled out. Okay, if you noticed when they tell you to use the fractions, it's more than likely that something is going to simplify, which is why they tell you to use 22/7. So please be cautious. If they tell you to use it, there's a reason they're telling you to use it. It's probably going to make it easier for you. All right, let's move down to question or practice 5. This time they're just giving me 2 images to find or to solve. Okay, let's identify circumference if I just give you an image. All right, they tell me to use 3.14 for pi. Round it to the nearest tenths, just like we were doing before. Okay, this picture has given me the diameter. Remember, the diameter is the one that goes all the way across. I always say the diameter is the longer word, so it's the longer line. Radius is the shorter word, so it's the shorter line. So I'm going to use that formula. C is equal to pi times the diameter. C is equal to, they tell me to use 3.14 times 20. Put that in your calculator. C is equal to 62.8. It's already in tenths, so you didn't even have to round. Okay, this one they've given me the radius, so C is equal to 2 times pi times r. C is equal to 2 times 3.14 times the r is 3. C is equal to, I see that it's 6 times 3.14, or if you'd put them all in the calculator, then you would have found that C is equal to 18.84, but they tell you to round it to the nearest tenths, so C is equal to 18.8, because the 4 tells the 8 to stay the same. All right, last practice before we move on to our individual practice with our groups. Practice 6, let's identify the diameter and the radius when given the circumference. So use 3.14 for pi. This is where topic 8 is going to come in handy, equations. Okay, they've given you the circumference and you need to find the diameter. So they tell you to use 3.14 for pi. You're going to write down the formula. C equals pi times the diameter. Well, they didn't give you the diameter, so you can't plug in the diameter. But they did give you the circumference, which is 25.12. And they did give you pi, which is 3.14. Okay, if I need to find the diameter, I'm going to do the opposite of what's being done to it. So currently the diameter is being multiplied by 3.14. The opposite of multiplying by 3.14 is dividing by 3.14. So to get the diameter by itself, divide by 3.14, divide by 3.14. This cancels, leaving you with just the diameter. And then in your calculator, put 25.12 divided by 3.14, and you'll get that the diameter is 8. Remember, the diameter is the longer line, which means the radius is the shorter line, which means half of 8 is 4. So it's quick to find the radius. Okay? Same thing with the next one. Circumference is equal to pi times the diameter. They don't give us the diameter. They say that the circumference is 50.24. They say pi is 3.14, and you need to find the diameter. I need to get the diameter by itself in order to figure out what it is. It's currently being multiplied by 3.14. The opposite of multiplying by 3.14 is dividing by 3.14. So in your calculator, you're going to put 50.24 divided by 3.14. When you do that, you get the diameter of 16. 16 divided by 2 is 8. Okay? C is equal to pi times diameter. They tell you that 43.96 is the circumference, 3.14 is pi, and we don't know the diameter. We have to get the diameter by itself. 3.14 is being divided on both sides in order to get the diameter by itself. So then the diameter, when I put it into my calculator, is 14. 14 cut in half is 7. Okay, hopefully this will help you have a better understanding of what circumference is and how to use the formula to figure out the radius, the diameter, and the circumference. And then you should be all set.